Okay. Here we are. Copy URL. Okay. There.
Okay. So it's been an eventful week.
I look forward to hearing. I've been absent.
Yeah. So I mean, I think a lot of the events have largely been on the co-op side, but we're slowly but surely working through all the issues. Just so that people are aware, we have been engaged in transitioning the Pyrofix team over to the co-op. So just so it's just been a lot of contract negotiations, making sure developers feel heard and they feel like we're supporting them, and that we're committed to making it all the way to the finish line. And so that's taken up a lot of my time. Steve, I don't know if you were around after you weren't here the day after the Friday call after the annual meeting.
Correct.
The annual meeting was very energetic in many ways, with a lot of people having concerns about what you've called the Louisiana Purchase. So I think it's in many ways it's very much like that. But if we're gonna extend the metaphor, then there's something about the Louisiana Purchase that's related to the co-op's manifest destiny.
Wow, that's scary. But it is really interesting to see that this is very early in the century.
Yeah.
And pioneers are the ones with the arrows in their backs, it looks like, actually.
Something like that. Yeah. I have to say though, if I understand my background correctly, my grandmother was some percentage Blackfoot, so I have Blackfoot blood somewhere in my veins. If I understand my heritage correctly.
I think I'd be more comfortable with some of these metaphors if we embrace them with a entirely different frame of history, like this. If maybe there's a way that this endeavor can be what's the genre of alternative history fiction or something where. Maybe the Louisiana Purchase happens, but those who would embrace manifest destiny figure out a different metaphor and model by which the transaction is embraced by more disparate communities in a better way to avoid some of the neuroses that our history is full of.
No, you're absolutely right. Maybe it's time to put an arrow through the head of this metaphor and move on to some other stuff. Fabian, I know you're at Womex. You want to talk about your experience at Womex and how that might impact RSong?
Hi there. Sorry about that. I was blending something on my NutriBullet. I'm back from the Canary Islands, did the Womex conference, and it was incredible. I mean, I've been going to this conference for 19 years now, and they put together a panel on blockchain in the beginning, and I got to speak to a good audience of about 100, 150 people regarding the future of the music industry and digital identity and mycelia and embedding your identity into music and what that means and how people will be paid in the future. And and got a lot of people incredibly interested in the ideas. A lot of incredible opportunities are being laid out on the table for when we have some technologies ready to bring out into the world. Excitement around the ideas of what smart tickets look like, what the world of beyond the creative passport, where we all know artists are able to embed their identity into songs. But one of the things that I've been very passionate about is refugees and visas and visa issues, and the concept of what mycelia can extend into around being able to build out something that touches upon how musicians are able to move around the world. And so yeah, it was a great conference. It's very much the beginning for that network to understand what the possibilities are around the technology. But there, because of the talk and my presence there, having RSong flyers in my hand, which was a great conversation opener. I think there's a whole world of opportunity that is essentially waiting to be seized.
Happy anniversary!
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Nora.
Hey, Fabian.
Yes.
It's Daryl here. How you doing?
Hi. Hey, Daryl. Daryl was my very last call as my flight was leaving to Spain, as we were getting down with the ideas of what we can do with the IP of a deceased superstar and how we could roll that out onto our platform. And you and I need to have a follow-up call, Daryl, and figure some things out around that.
Awesome. Sounds good. I was just wondering whether you had a chance to meet up with Claire while you were down there.
Of course. I went out to dinner with Claire. Claire and I were on the same panel together. And we got to hang out and drink rum and check out some music and really get down on visioning on things that could happen in the future, and both of us understanding from both sides of our table what is happening in the present.
Excellent. Great to hear.
Yeah. It was solid. So that's my basic summary of the Womex experience. I hear an echo here. Ultimately, I think just at the end, I know our conversations here, so much of it relies around what's happening at the co-op, what has been happening with our partner companies, and the technology that we currently have on hand. And I'm really, really hopeful that in the coming months leading up to mainnet, that we're able to monetize some of the things that are on the table. That way we can bring revenue in and also further prove the concept of the things that we've been creating and dreaming up, and with the possibilities of some significant PR initiatives that we might be engaging with, and being able to roll out these techs and start making some money would be a really great thing. Because not only in the space of let's make money, but in the space of we can prove that these things can make an impact in the world.
And even outside of the ArtChain community is what the promise is of what the technology has the potential of being as we build it. And any of us can go off and look at that. Basically, a battery is promised. So some people, when they get the battery, they'll say, oh, look, a battery, what can I do with that? But if we can consider mechanisms that use batteries, we can go off and build little cars. And when the batteries come, we just plug it in and we'll be all ready. So a lot of preliminary work can be done completely outside and independently, and maybe even decentralized from this one place on the shore where all the water wants to come up, because the water can come up all along the shore, and it's a lot easier to do it that way. So that's what I'm doing anyway.
Yes.
I think we should pass it to Ilan here, who is new, I think. Are you new today?
I am totally new.
Awesome. So please introduce yourself and maybe expand on what you were just saying in the chat a little bit.
Okay, I will. And unfortunately, I only have 20 minutes, so I don't know how long those conferences are. So I'll try to go as quickly as I can. So I'm from VibeChain. VibeChain is a crowdsourced playlist making application. So the basic use case is everyone has been at the party where everyone's on their phone trying to play their own music on the sound system. So what we do is that our application, our aim is to enable people to actually crowdsource how they're going to make that party playlist. And so the way that we envision it is you have an invitation to a party. In the invitation, to answer the invitation, you have to input 3 songs. And once you submit them, they become part of a master playlist for the party. Once you arrive at the party, the songs get activated so that we know that you are present. And they get mixed into the grander playlist. And so everybody can have their song played without having to try to hog the sound system. We found we were born 3.5 months ago. We are now an official company. I met with Kevon on Sunday at the legal hackathon as we were trying to, I was like really interested because one of our long-term vision is to be able to stream from blockchain platforms to our users. And so I went to the legal hackathon here in Boston where I met with Kevon, and we started doing the first test implementation of how would it work if we had some kind of a search that would return, that we could search our songs and return music so that people could actually use that content and add it to the playlist. So that's where I am. I'm really interested, and our team is in general, our long-term objective really is to be able to stream from any of the blockchain music services. So RSong is kind of one of the first implementation. Ujo was also an attempt, but I think that it has not moved very much over the last few months. So RSong is a project that I'm really interested in, and we're also talking a lot to musicians and artists that we would like to onboard so that we can actually apply some of the ideas behind blockchain to our system. Our basic idea is that we are going to be a very normal technology company in the initial stage so that we can grow our user base. And our objective is to get to 100,000 by next Christmas. And once we are there, we hope that we can help the blockchain and the different dApp environment also onboard new user in an easier way. And we can also onboard our own users into the ideas behind blockchain. We plan to implement, despite the fact that our technology is going to be fairly normal, we are on the company level, we are going to try to implement the ideas behind the blockchain and the philosophy of distributed ledger technology at the core of the way we run our company. So transparency, equity, correct right distributions in terms of content management, all those are things that are fundamental to the way that we see Vibe Chain evolve in the future. And so we're really looking forward and hoping that we can find a good ground of collaboration with our chain and RSong.
Cool. Hey, Ian, that's really exciting. I don't know if when you were up, if you had a chance to meet with the guys from Hello Friend. So they're one of our portfolio companies, and they're based out of the Harvard User Group initially. So,
okay.
They're up in your neck of the woods. So I'm just thinking there's so much synergy. So what they're doing is like events. And they're building on our platform where users can attend events and people can host events. And it seems like, to me, just hearing what you're doing, that there's a lot of dovetailing that could be done with their hosting of the events, and then you're coming in with creating the music for that event.
That would be awesome. I look forward to be able to connect with them.
So if you want, I'll send out an intro email after this meeting and introduce, and then, hope maybe you guys could, get together and do some brainstorming.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Thank you, Lon. I really, sorry, there's a little echo here. That was a really great introduction, and I was really glad that you and Kevon could get connected, and I'm really interested in what you're doing. I love this. I love the kind of collective intelligence thing. That's very, very much what our chain is all about, attempting to enable. And we also, fundamentally believe that starting these kinds of experiments in low risk, high fun situations is very much the right way to go. I could see a group playlist as one way for everyone to hear the mood of the entire group, And I've thought a lot about the kinds of applications where we can either hear or see the mood of an entire collective. It's a very interesting application. So as I understand that you and Kayvon were able to get an end-to-end search feature implemented.
Yeah, we were like kind of it was let's call it basic, like the basic framework of how it would work. Submit a query and return a JSON, so that we have the information, and then we can enter that into the playlist. And then so one of the principle of behind the concept is also in our implementation, that current implementation in the prototype, is that each phone plays the songs on the device itself, so that we don't have to deal with copyright issues. So if people want to stream from a Spotify, they have their music on Spotify or Apple Music, they can still stream from there, but it's from their phone. And so this would be very useful in the same way that you would be the first, we're trying to, the interface would work like that. We'd be able to search what you have as content and then add it to that playlist. So yes, it was like kind of a basic JSON object with all of the features. And we basically went and looked at, because that's what I had done on the MVP that I'm doing. I was developing on iOS. So we went to see how Apple had defined the metadata of all the songs, so that we could mimic that, and then I kind of have the same kind of JSON that we would store for each song. So it was a lot of fun.
Oh,
it was
good.
a lot of fun. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to doing much more on this.
Oh, cool. And the implementation was on the RChain side, or was it on your side, or?
No, on the RChain side.
That's awesome.
We did it all on we did it all on CLI, and the query was like a curl to RSong, and it would return the. I don't know. I can't remember exactly how Kayvon had it set up, but basically it was from the chain. It was returning from the chain.
Fantastic. No, that's really great news. Yeah, looking forward to engaging with you guys more. Yeah. If I think Lilia is on the call. If you have some time, maybe Lilia could help coordinate a meeting between the two of us. If you have time, that would be
great.
fun.
Yes,
I'd love that.
Great. After you, Lilia.
I'm sorry. Okay, so yes, I'm on the call, and I am happy to coordinate the call.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's really kind of you. Great. And who is Winfield? Have you come to the call before?
I have not come to the call before. How you guys doing, everybody? I working on a project called The Grumps with my man Rich Jensen, and he was telling me about all these interesting technology, these conversations that were happening, and all this cutting edge things that were going down. And I'm very interested in using blockchain technology. I do content, visual content, and but really looking at using that in a community development perspective, so that when I shoot content within different communities, we can that content can actually go back, and as we build value in a currency, these communities can actually benefit from their stories being told, no matter how or where they're being told. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. So I was just very interested to hear what was going on, So that's kind of it in a quick nutshell. And I'm in Memphis right now, so I'm kind of on the move. That's why I had my camera off, because it's probably very busy behind.
Actually, your camera's on, but.
I had it off. I wanted you guys to see when I talked to you.
Oh yeah, no. Okay, got it. Yeah, totally understood. Yeah,
yeah.
Cool. No, that's not understood. Well, yeah, I don't know if you know about RSong itself, but RSong was a proof point for RChain. RChain is even at this point about 1,000 times faster than Bitcoin and Ethereum. And we're in testnet now. We're working as diligently and as rapidly as we can to bring it to mainnet. And the RSong application stores the audio files directly on the network, right on chain. This is impossible with Ethereum and Bitcoin at this point. And we did that not because it's for audio applications it's actually necessary, but what it does is it makes a particular point. It makes a point about the kind of data that we can store, and the provenance of that data, and the storage model itself, and how that relates to the economics. And the RSong application is, in fact, a application template. So very, very small amounts of tweaking on RSong, and you could have a photo sharing app, or a video sharing app, or so it would be quite interesting to look at the different content classes that you use to organize or work with your communities, and see if you could take RSong as a basic template and put together an application that better serve or more directly serve the communities you're serving.
Right on. No, that sounds great. I mean, I mean, the truth of the matter is, I mean, you know, I'm not in any way a developer, and I don't say I'm an expert on the technology behind it, but what I am intentional about is definitely passing value down to the community and the community development and civic engagement side as it connects to how we build and how communities get to participate in what's going on at every level, economically, technology, whether the stories are being told, businesses, or whatever. So, you know, that's, you know, so I just wanted to say that.
And I want to point
and
out
at the same time, Winfield, it'll be censorship resistant, which I think is really important.
Yes, very important.
And I just want to point out that my interest in, you know, this is Winfield presents a case where he's being a bit modest because he's actually producing video content libraries and architectures for reproducing his, you know, when there's a shoot, all of that content can be repurposed and serve a variety of communities maximally. And it's this architecture that is critical in Winfield's particular approach. And so I think there's, I just want people to understand that there's extraordinary benefit to making the bridge here. And I'm very grateful to Winfield for making time this morning to kind of get involved in the communication circle.
Cool. Thank you, Rich. Thanks for bringing him in. I really enjoyed the comments that we had last week from the other side of the camp, which was we had someone who was an instrumental in the MMA and the MLC, who I think initially started off as very much vocally opposed to MMA, but over time began to look at ways that it could be utilized to serve the underserved, especially in terms of the artist communities. And I'm gonna see if we can bring him back. I think he provided a really perspective on this. But I think that there needs to be something similar across each of the different content classes, right? I think there's lots of ways in which, you know, people have been disenfranchised from sharing in the profits of their work. You know, a lot of journalism, blog entries, you know, Medium articles, all of that stuff is right now being subsidized by a variety of private institutions. But I think journalism at large is really a public service. And needs to be vetted by the public and by all of the stakeholders in a particular investigation. And I think that the RSong platform, especially with the kind of if you think about the crowdsourcing techniques that go into Elon's offering, very similar kinds of crowdsourcing techniques could go into the vetting of a wide variety of content. And so I think that there's a huge potential here when we talk about RSong, both in terms of its being able to re-enfranchise, if that's a word, content providers, as well as make sure that what's being delivered is properly curated and properly sourced, and that the community feels that they have a sense of who the originators of ideas and offerings are, and who are key contributors and that kind of thing. And so that it's, in other words, a lot of the reporting and accounting solutions that go into RSong have direct applicability to other kinds of digital data assets and other kinds of community data. So I'm really, really excited about those opportunities, and would love to see what we could do to bring in more expertise around that.
Unfortunately, I have to leave, so I just want to salute you, and I'll be back next week. Thank you very much for being there and doing what you're doing. Lots of fun, and I'm looking forward to talking with you, Lucius. Let me know when you want to have a meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay. Any other burning questions or comments for today's meeting? Who is
Rich had a question about the potential sub-licensing progress, right? Is that right?
I asked whether it's appropriate for the venue.
We can't really talk about in this venue.
Yeah, I'll just say this. I am hopeful that I understand. I understand how some of the political turbulence in the co-op can affect those discussions, and I guess I would just say that there are great opportunities, and I really whatever people want to talk about the price means nothing if great opportunities result from it, and so I am encouraging everyone throughout the community to understand that there are great opportunities and great resources to transact. And I look forward to hearing good news when good news is available.
Of course. Thank you, Rich. I really wish I could talk about it here. Chris Williams, do you want to introduce yourself? Have you been on the call before?
I haven't. This is my first time on the call, and I'll be a frequent visitor from now on. I'm more on the dev side, just generally speaking, and I'm working on building a few example apps with RSong. So this is a bit of a fact-finding mission for me. I've known about RSong for a while, and I've actually tried to repurpose some of Kayvon's early work with deploying RSong onto a Raspberry Pi. And so I'm very interested in everything that's coming out of RSong, all the different applications for it.
What kind of things are you building, Chris?
I'm building something called a coin faucet. It's very unrelated to RSong or any of the media distribution apps that we're talking about. I didn't know if this was the proper forum to talk about it, but I'm on Discord. My handle is Mr. Money Changer, and that's kind of my shtick. I'm very interested in money theory and how to make money work differently. That's my particular take on how we're going to fix the future.
And your take on how to work with money differently, are you in what format are you interested in that? In music, entertainment, banking, finance, and which bucket are you focused
on? All of the above. I'd like to make the plumbing and let everybody apply it the way they want to. And so like money is a tool that buys you all those things. So again, I feel like I'm hijacking our conversation about RSong.
No, that's actually great. Faith and I are actually talking about this.
Yeah. So I just want to say Chris is being extremely modest. What he's done with the Raspberry Pi, what he continues to do, he's pretty far along in a user interface for his coin faucet, from what I heard yesterday. We had a meeting with Chris, myself, and Rudy. I mean, just the ideas we generated for how we could use this coin faucet. Chris, if you don't mind, I'd like to say one of your ideas, which is putting a Raspberry Pi running our node in, say, a bar, and then the coin faucet would drop coins periodically at some configurable rate to the people at the bar, so they could then use that coin to go buy a beer or whatever they want, which will generate more income for the bar. Because if you win that drop, you know, everybody you're drinking with is going to say, okay, this round is on you. So, but you know, even outside that, there are just so many applications for this. It's so exciting. You know, even in just the hour meeting we had, all the ideas that were generated. So I'm glad Chris is joining us, and I welcome his input here.
And I'd also say, if there's two things that we're trying to prove with our chain, more transactions per second than Visa and more data storage than Facebook, I know RSong is definitely going to satisfy the second. It's going to store way more data than Facebook. But I feel like Coin Faucet could deliver on the first, because the idea was, just like Ned said, you put this in a bar, and at the top of the hour, it drops a coin. Well, what happens when you put it into 100,000 bars and they all drop a coin at the top of the hour? So we have to clear all those transactions instantly. And let's say it's not just bars. Let's say there's any number of use cases we've listed out that could all on their own involve tens of thousands of transactions a second. So I feel like this is my way of helping with the first item, more transactions per second than Visa, or at least create an app that's going to demand that.
Well, I feel like that's very related to what's going on with RSong, because the problem basically in the music industry is the way that, not just the way that money is distributed, but how it's distributed. You know, obviously, a lot of people in the music industry are missing a lot of their royalties that are in this called the black box. In many ways, but it sounds like what you're building is something that could directly plug into what RSong is working on. So actually, I find it very related.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one idea, I just want to throw this out there and related to RSong. So I was at a San Jose Sharks hockey game, and the SAP Arena in San Jose has amazing Wi-Fi connectivity. And when the game, right before the game started, they had everybody download their app and run kind of like a bet game, like who do you think is going to win the game? And it hit me that, you know, why couldn't we, and it wouldn't have to be a Raspberry Pi, embed our node servers at the SAP Center and drop like free plays of a very well-known artist onto their RSong app. And they also have concerts there. So there's no reason we couldn't do that at a general sporting event or even at a concert and drop into RSong. And their app has like different tabs. So we could even have an RSong tab on the San Jose Sharks app. And you know, I think they're looking for these kind of deals all the time. And it just will take Rudy or Fabian to go talk to them and pitch this, but it seems like a no-brainer, and that will generate. So, you know, if we're looking to increase our transactions, to me, that's like a great way to do it in an arena that holds 17,000 people.
You know, I absolutely agree, Ned, and it's also an opportunity for lots of our portfolio companies as well. One of the things that has happened recently is that Shop, which was a reflective portfolio company, has launched their offering. So they're they're providing a kind of marketplace. Think of it as a kind of decentralized Amazon, and they have a token. And I could imagine that there's a really nice connection between their token and, let's say, a token tab on RSong. This would be a very, very natural thing to do, so that a certain level of engagement with RSong would make certain tokens available within these marketplaces. And this touches in on Fabian's point, which is, how do you begin to provide the right kind of economics for tokens for different kinds of artists, right? So, we've talked about how it would, it's relatively easier for a living artist to provide differentiating value. So Nora Germain for violin lessons like no one else. But for an artist that has passed away, let's say Leonard Cohen or someone of that stature, if there are assets that were continually being delivered, and maybe assets that are not even being delivered by Leonard Cohen's estate, but by someone who has those kinds of offerings. Then the question is, how do you create an ecosystem of value? And that seems to have to be related to partnerships. And I think it's really important that a lot of those partnerships are kind of digitally enabled, right? It's one thing to have partnerships that involve other merchandise, for example, Leonard Cohen figurines and Leonard Cohen fedoras and T-shirts and things like that. So those are all partnerships that would potentially enrich such an offering, but that requires a lot of manufacturing. Whereas digital and a lot of agreements on the back end with regard to that. But with respect to digital partners in the digital ecosystem, this is much more readily constructed and takes a lot less time.
Mm-hmm.
So Fabian, I haven't stopped working on the problem. I'm thinking about it.
I know. We need to hammer. We have to hammer out an economic solution for that way we can see if we can harness the opportunity.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Be careful, Greg, what you say. That Leonard Cohen fedora thing. I don't want to see baristas looking like Leonard all over the place.
Do we have a high barista audience, high concentration of baristas in the audience for this call?
Oh God.
You never know. They come from nowhere.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Any other burning topics for our discussion this week? I was really enjoying the flow, and it seems like a little dip in the flow.
Well, one thing I was really excited about with what Elon was talking about, with the concept of a kind of a collaborative filtering in playlists concept, has to do with the whole concept of curation and how curation has evolved in the music industry and how it could evolve. Largely, the music industry for the last 100 years, since the birth of recorded music, has been curated by large corporations. Right now, there's basically 3 large major labels, and they've controlled curation through radio, terrestrial radio, which is still very powerful, surprisingly. And that still continues to be kind of how they've dominated curation, how they've kind of dominated what we listen to, what we choose to listen to. And I see a shift in that happening in the near future, which I think will be kind of the last stage of control that the major labels will be able to wield. They've lost control of production. And so now all they can cling on to is distribution and marketing. So if we can imagine a system where you have collaborative filtering involved in curation, much like what Elon is working on in the world of partying, but we put that to other things, where our playlists that form out of our streaming music platforms can be developed through collaborative filtering, we could really see a shift happening. So I'm kind of curious to explore those ideas a little bit more.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. This is very it's a very interesting and kind of rich idea, and I think it's unfolding in a sort of playful context. I have to confess, there's a part of me that that frets and worries about the amount of time we've got to begin to tap into our collective intelligence, and trying to get it to be focused on consumption behaviors and supply chain management problems that are going to directly impact whether or not we see a greater than 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in the global temperature. That's just like constantly in my mind, but the other part of me says, don't relax, take it easy, have some fun, and try to play with the collective intelligence as it's making playlists and other kinds of things like that, because that's how we begin, right? As children, we start off playing, before we start coding.
Craig, I have a question. Sorry to interrupt you. You can continue.
No, go for it.
I'm working on a new article called "What is RSong for the Common Person?"
Sweet.
And Ned is going to help me with it, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of input from a bunch of people. Leapfrogging off of what you just said, I was taking some notes before about your thoughts about collective intelligence. And I had a question on how you view the merits of collective intelligence versus kind of the pitfall of groupthink, and how I might kind of explain that in the article about, do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. And this is something that the co-op has been facing, right? Is exactly that. Yeah. So it's really, really important. The way I think about it is something that Rich touches on a lot, which is diversity. When all are welcome and every voice has a chance to be heard, then you actually get a lot more conflict. You get a lot more quality assurance, because people, first of all, when they feel free to speak their mind, then they speak their mind, and it becomes harder for groupthink to take hold. A lot of times, groupthink starts to take hold when people are um, feel less connected to being able to speak their own version of, or their own experience, right? They sort of glom on to someone else. But if they're able to feel, again, this is just my opinion and my experience, but when people feel comfortable speaking to their particular truth, then you start to see a lot more diversity of opinion, a lot more nuance, and that kind of thing. But I'd be curious as to what other people think about this, because I think it's a really important question, Nora.
Yeah, I'd like to take a stab at that, because let me preface this by saying I totally believe in ideas and people contributing to discussions, and you definitely get a synergy from that group conversation. At the same time, I feel you have to have strong leadership, directing that conversation, and you have to have leaders who are totally transparent and open to those conversations, but you have to have leadership. Otherwise, you devolve really quickly into what I'll call the Lord of the Flies syndrome. And you also have a problem, what happens if we had a conversation and Nazis joined our conversation? What happens if we had a conversation out and out homophobes and racists joined our conversation? So there has to be some kind of leadership, and everybody has to be committed to the process of coming up with a better solution and not just trolling and spouting for the sake of spouting. So honestly, when I hear like this idea of collective intelligence, I personally have, even though I kind of practice that, right? In the software development teams I lead, I totally practice that. But I lead it, right? And so this idea of an unfettered collective consciousness really, I don't think history has proven that people are all well-intentioned, and I don't know. I think I've said what I had to say.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like I hear what's being said. I think this is a fascinating area. I think architecture has a lot to say here. Proper design. It's kind of like design for the possibility of collective intelligence, but for the probability of collective stupidity and discord. And and so it's not only designed for the best, but designed for the worst. And like, how do you vent the worst? Or how do you design for criticality so that as the group sees what, we don't have to agree. How do we design for disagreement so that we can coexist? I like to say that community, like we have, what basically keying off what Ned is saying, I've felt this for years, is that a community is not simply an affinity group. A community includes people we despise, but we maintain a relationship with because they're part of the community. And that's really what the community is. And, this is obviously there's social implications in this sphere that the whole world is going through, and in fact, I think is part of how, if we are, as Greg spoke to a minute ago, if we're to use the next 12 years for a kind of social intervention, it's as much being able to hold on to the best as it is being able to vent the worst appropriately. Yeah, I could say quite a bit more, but it's time for somebody else to talk.
One thing I'd like to talk about a bit in this conversation is something that Greg has shown me, one of the many things, just to shower your ego with some flattery, that he talked about honeybee democracy. Apparently, this guy named Tom Seeley has this kind of study that he's done on how honeybees make decisions. And it's connected to what Ned was talking about, where there are leaders, and these leaders are scout bees. When a hive decides that they need to find a new location, they have 4 days or so to kind of do that. And in those 4 days, they lie very exposed and vulnerable, kind of like our co-op. They're exposed and vulnerable, and they need guidance. So these scout bees go out and they try to find a new location. And they have a very simple messaging system of how to relay back what they found. So they do this kind of little bum wiggle dance. And the length of their bum wiggle dance describes the distance, and the direction of the butt is where it is. And the enthusiasm is a big part of it as well. So there's those three messages. And so then further bees go out to explore the ones that have more enthusiasm. And in a matter of 4 days, they make a really good do a really good job at selecting the next location. And so I think that within the concept of collaborative filtering or collective intelligence, and the concept of like groupthink, there will always be those scout bees among us who kind of help guide the way. So I think I used to work for a mountain equipment co-op, which was a co-op in Canada. It was kind of like the REI of Canada, and the same thing. Like with that co-op, there's very little engagement amongst the larger group, and there's always just some key people that kind of help guide things along. So I think that's just we're seeing it happen right now. We're just talking about what's going on, really.
Well, bees have an advantage that they can't buy Lamborghinis. They can't feather their nest with all kinds of badges and symbols of attainment. So they work on fairly tight tasks. I think that's where it breaks down a little bit. But interestingly,
there's not really a lot of corruption. There's not really a lot of corruption going on in.
There seems to be less
system.
But it seems like these kinds of conversations that we have in many Zoom rooms have one problem, is that they tend to go to a high level of abstraction, and anyone out there wanting to adopt anything that we're doing would have to be brought into this in a gentle way. And there's a disconnect between all the stuff that we say on a regular basis and take for granted and what people who are out there as early adopters or whatever else, what they need in order to understand anything of what we're saying. So I think there's a layer of evangelists. We're always talking about evangelists. There's a layer we need who are trained to do this very well, to go out there and say, this is how you fit in. This is where we can bring you in. This is what we offer. I don't see that layer. And that's a marketing layer, probably, among other things.
Well,
So,
one thing I love about what Daryl said, or the honeybees, that 4 days, they have 4 days, and I guess if not, they perish. So it's time boxed. And maybe that's one thing we're lacking. We don't have a time box around all these discussions, even though we're really, as a cooperative and as a platform, suffering. So I love the fact that it's time boxed. So maybe there is dissent. I don't know what the honeybees do. I'm trying to get my bumble wiggle on, but I do like that concept of time boxing.
Ian offered a really interesting statement that I'll read because I want to respond to. We are not honeybees. We are primates programmed to fight for the survival of our small tribes, which I want to take exception to at the end. But to finish, he says, collective intelligence for humans requires filtering, moderation, and acknowledgement of our human faults, which I think is exactly right. And I want to just change a little. I want to remark on the fight for survival, because we've been taught that for generations, that competition, and I'll let you can. I'm so hi. It's great to see you, Ian. Thanks for popping in. I'm sorry to just to drill down and call you out here, and I'm sure we probably agree, and over coffee we'll come to understand. But I wanted to point out that because that's a meme that's been out there for hundreds of years. It's commonplace to imagine this competitive struggle where, in fact, it's social coordination. It's our higher capability to abstract, to imagine ourselves, to sort of dream ourselves into other positions in society that allows us to be fluent. And it's these capacities and these skills of kind of interoperable fluency with what are the conditions of a particular group? How do I show my understanding, respect, and regard? How do I prove work with my standing in that community to such a degree that the message from my community can also get to them? And that translation process is the key skill that I think Rudy might be speaking to. And again, I could see by his gestures he's agreeing with what I'm saying. But
well, I want to speak too.
Yeah, thank you.
So definitely, coordination and cooperation are a superior strategy for survival, for species survival, for survival of the planet. And I'm the last one in the world to get behind Herbert Spencer and some, misstatement of Darwin's theories in this, survival of the fittest. No. So I don't want to be interpreted that way. Yeah. But I was
Really
checking
noted.
out.
I wanted to respond to because it is such a commonplace meme, and it's the kind of thing that I think Rudy was just speaking to. It's about getting a little closer to understand, because the patriarchal fight representing the tribe. There has to be a victim. There has to be conflict. This conflict is constructive. We hear this all the time. It's so much so that many people, there's an education problem finding people who have been steeped in this worldview. You have to kind of go, well, okay, let's take the time to look at why you say these things. And yes, you have a point, but in fact, there are other things that we do with our brains than just beat each other senseless. There's an education process with many people in the world right now. And so that's another, I wanted to make one point, which again is architectural, which is based in geometry and is fundamental, and that is part of the realization of what we need to have in our minds as we go forward to this 12 critical years, is that we are limited. We are limited. There are areas where we're not limited. We can imagine mathematics, which stretches on ad infinitum and beyond in infinite dimensions. We are smart enough to imagine those things and talk about these terrific abstractions. But in fact, we are located on a sphere. When you go this way long enough, you come back and hit yourself in the head. So that is our condition, is to make this sphere and its limited resources, its limited number of people work. We need social architectures that conform to this spherical formation. That is the beginning of having a rational conversation about what do we do with ourselves here. So anyway, these are great triggers. I appreciate the opportunity. End of rant.
Well, hour's just about up. I really appreciate the conversation from all directions. I guess what I would say also finally with respect to groupthink, and this question that Nora brought up, and all the different ways that people thought about how we might go about engaging each other differently, is that music really qualitatively, experientially changes the way we interact with each other. Whether we're playing together, or we're dancing together, or we're listening to music from others, music changes everything. It lifts us up to a better version of ourselves, almost invariably. And that's one of the primary reasons that I have put so much time and energy into RSong and into this piece of the coordination puzzle, is because we really are going to have to coordinate each other. Is a very, very practical way to begin to address that. So with that, I need to reclaim the room because we have a staff meeting happening in the room. So if you're not an RChain staff member, if you wouldn't mind dropping off now. Thank you one and all. Looking forward to talking with you again.